is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Blood of Elves, Chapter 7. In this chapter, we get to find out exactly what kind of training Ciri has been going through, and how Yennefer treats her, and what their relationship is like. And it turns out that all of this is going better than I expected. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. Many thanks to Melanie for commissioning this episode. Hi, Melanie. Melanie is here. So this is the final episode, or the final chapter of the book, final episode also of this book. And it's like, I pretty much figured, because of how much was in the air, that this was going to have to end in a way that did not feel like an ending. And that's pretty true. That's pretty much how it just really suddenly is like, she thought she'd come back. She was wrong. End of book. Which was really abrupt and strange. And I admit I wasn't aware this was the final chapter of the book until I saw the epilogue or something pop up. Like, it wasn't even an epilogue because I would have read that. It was like the excerpt, I think Melanie had said, for the next book, which I did not read on her instruction. So yeah, this was a really sudden ending. And I wanted to back up a little bit because I had said to you guys last time that I was completely out of time to cover what wound up happening at the end of the last chapter. It's really weird because, like, these chapters are technically around 50 pages, but they feel longer. And I'm not sure if it's because they bounce around between so many POVs or if it's just that the story is really dense. But I am not surprised that I ran out of time the last time because there was just so much to discuss. And the ending of the last chapter really was a bit of a shock. So we had this whole thing with fucking Rince, who has been trying to track down this Witcher in order to kill him. And I don't know how aware Rince is of exactly how dangerous Geralt is. I feel like he must be pretty aware because he agrees to that doubled price from those mercenaries. But he, even having agreed to a higher price, it still feels like he's not ready. Like, he's not really prepared for who he winds up dealing with. So let's get into this little section here because the fight between the two of them is really something. Geralt is able to, they're figuring out exactly where this person is going to be. And I'm trying to find this moment that I want to talk about here. Oh yeah, that's right. Because they're talking to somebody that the medical student had seen with Rince. She had gone in there and had been groped by Rince, and this dude, mentioned him by name in saying that he should back off. And they go to question this dude and find out what he knows. And at first he tries to be like, I'm not telling you shit. You're just, but it's all just so pointless. Like his protestations that he doesn't know who she's talking about. She's like, I literally heard you say his name. Like, I remember. Don't even pretend. Geralt decides that he is going, okay, I'm going to read this part with, because I'm all over the place here. Vilgefortz is the one that I wanted to start this all off with. Geralt At one time she was closely tied to a certain witcher. They're talking about Yennefer here. Geralt, if I'm not mistaken. It seems it wasn't just an ordinary passing affair. It appears Yennefer was quite strongly involved. Why are you asking about that? They're personal matters. It's none of our business. Of course, it's none of our business, but I'm not being guided by unhealthy curiosity, but concern about the emotional state of a member of the council. I'm wondering about Yennefer's reaction to the news of Geralt's death. I presume she would get over it, come to terms with it, without falling into a depression or exaggerated mourning. And Tisea, I believe is her name, says, yeah, well, basically she says, considering that, like, she heard that he had died a bunch of times and it was not true, she's pretty much, like, unmoved by that sort of news now. He is a mutant, a murdering machine, programmed to kill and not let himself be killed. And as for Yennefer, let us not exaggerate her alleged emotions. We know her. She does not give in to emotions. She toyed with the Witcher. That's all. She was fascinated with death, which this character constantly courts. And when he finally brings it on himself, that will be the end of it. For the time being, remarked Tisea de Vries dryly, the Witcher is alive. Vilgefortz smiled and once more glanced at the letter lying in front of him. Is that so? He said. I don't think so. So, this is our clue that he has allied himself with Nilfgaard's king, who Emrys, I think is his name. And it just goes to show how completely he misunderstands everything, because he's speaking with such total confidence and authority here. Oh, Yennefer isn't really interested in him. Dude, Yennefer is into this motherfucker like hard. Hard. Like, what are you talking about? And then trying to be like, oh yeah, they've pretty much taken care of the Witcher. Have you met this guy? Because I would not be talking with any kind of confidence on that point. But go off. So, we go to Geralt, who has drunk some elixir in preparation for coming up against Rince. And the elixir allows him to see better in the dark, also allows him to hear a lot better. And he hears 5 or 6 men that are coming at him. He looked up but did not see Philippa. Immediately, he changed tactics. If Rince was amongst those approaching, he had little chance of grabbing him. He would first have to fight his escort, and he did not want to do so. Firstly, as he was under the influence of the elixir, those men would have to die. Secondly, Rince would then have the opportunity to flee. So, I like that. He's under the influence of this elixir, and he's like, oh, I'm sorry, guys, but once I drunk this shit, there's really, like, nothing to be done. Y'all are dead. Sorry about that. Miley. Like, it's kind of amusing to me, to be honest. So this fight goes about how you would expect, with these dudes completely misunderstanding their position in this fight. Rince knew who was waiting for him by the charlatan's house. Rince had suspected an ambush, and yet he had still come. The Witcher realized why, and that was even before he had heard the quiet grating of swords being drawn from their scabbards. Fine, he thought. If that's what you want, fine. It is a pleasure hunting for you, said Rince quietly. You appear where you're wanted of your own accord. You must have pushed Mirman hard to tell you about the amulet, to show you where it is hidden, and how to activate it to send out a message. But Mirman didn't know that the amulet informs and warns at the same time, and so he could not have told you even if roasted on red coals. I have distributed a good many of these amulets. I knew that sooner or later you would come across one of them. I waited, and here you are. I intend to finally rid the earth of your burden, you foul changeling. Then comes you're a mutant, you're a heap of dung on the road, yada, yada, yada. I know where to find that witch of yours, Yennefer. My patrons don't care about her, but I bear the whore a personal grudge. As soon as I finish with you, I'm going after her. I'll see to it that she regrets her tricks with fire. Oh, yes, she is going to regret them for a very long time." "You shouldn't have said that." The Witcher smiled nastily, feeling the euphoria of battle aroused by the elixir, reacting with adrenaline. "Before you said that, you still had a chance to live. Now, you don't." A powerful oscillation of his Witcher's medallion warned him of a sudden assault. He jumped aside, and drawing his sword in a flash, deflected and annihilated the violent, paralyzing wave of magical energy directed at him with his rune-covered blade. Rince backed away, raised his arm to make a move, but at the last moment took fright. Not attempting a second spell, he swiftly retreated down the lane. So what this comes down to is that Rince is a little bitch. Like, apparently he expected no fight from the Witcher. Like, what did he think he was getting into? The moment that this dude... I mean, I guess it's part of a setup, but I'm not sure that this part's part of a setup. We'll get to that. Okay. So the Witcher is jumped on by all of the others, basically kills all of them. And he heard Shawnee's terrified scream as she tried to pull herself free of Dandelion on the bridge leading to the charlatan's house. Rince retreated into the depths of the lane, raising and spreading both arms in front of him, a magical light already beginning to exude from them. Geralt grasped his sword with both hands and without a second thought ran towards him. The sorcerer's nerves could not take it. Without completing his spell, he began to run away, yelling incomprehensibly. But Geralt understood. He knew that Rince was calling for help, begging for help. And help arrived. The little street blazed with a bright light, and on the dilapidated, sullied walls of a house flared the fiery oval of a portal. Rince threw himself towards it. So, Geralt manages to, grab Rince by the ankles. The dude does wind up getting through because of fucking Philippa. We'll talk about that in a second. And let's say, oh yeah, that's right. To Blanc Michelet groaned and curled up, clutching his riven belly. And here comes this moment where Philippa comes next to him and is just like, "I'll be able to make you feel better. Don't worry, it'll be all right." Meanwhile, he's like, "Rince told us it was an ordinary fool, but it was a fucking Witcher, that son of a bitch." Having already thrown his sword, we're back with Geralt now. Already thrown his sword aside, his hands were free, and his fingers, extending in a leap, dug into the edge of Rince's cloak. Rince lost his balance. The tug had bent him backward, forcing him to totter back. He struggled furiously, violently ripped the cloak from clasp to clasp to free himself, but too late. So, pressed down by the Witcher's knee, Rince extended his arm and opened his mouth to cast a spell. Geralt clenched his fist and thumped him from above straight in the mouth, and his lips split like black currants. He struck once more. The sorcerer's head bounced up. Blood spurted into the Witcher's forehead and cheeks. Geralt was slightly surprised. He had not felt any pain, but had no doubt been injured in the fight. It was his blood. So he continues with this, asking him, "Who hired you?" And Geralt thinks that he is going to be able to apparently aim at this portal. And I don't know if he wanted to hit somebody who he thought was going to come through it, try and close it, or what exactly he was attempting to do. It was a mistake. No one emerged from the portal. Only power radiated from it, and Rince had taken the power. From the sorcerer's outstretched fingers grew 6-inch steel spikes. They dug into Geralt's chest and shoulder with an audible crack. Energy exploded from the spikes. The Witcher threw himself backward in a convulsive leap. The shock was such that he felt and heard his teeth, clenched in pain, crunch and break. At least 2 of them. Yo. That's fucked up. Basically, he gives him like a really intense electric shock with embedded spikes. Like, good God, that's fucked up. Something grabbed Geralt from behind, overpowered him, immobilized him. The medallion on his neck pulsated acutely. The pain in his wounded shoulder throbbed spasmodically. Some 10 paces behind him stood Philippa Eilhart. From her raised arms emanated a dull light. 2 streaks, 2 rays. Both were touching his back, squeezing his arms with luminous pliers. He could not move. He could only watch as Rince staggered up to the portal, which pulsated with a milky glow. So Rince just bails, and he asks, "Why did you do that?" And she's like, "You know why. You can feel the pain. You're wounded, Geralt. You can't feel the pain because you're intoxicated. But look how you're bleeding. Have you calmed down sufficiently for me to safely approach and take a look at you? And don't come near me. One more step. I don't want to hurt you. But if you come near..." She knew all along what she was doing. She took advantage of us, betrayed us, deceived. "Calm down," repeated Philippa Eilhart. "You won't understand, and you don't have to understand. I did what I had to do, and don't call me a traitor, because I did this precisely so as not to betray a cause which is greater than you can imagine. A great and important cause, so important that minor matters have to be sacrificed for it without second thoughts if faced with such a choice. Geralt, damn it, we're nattering and you're standing in a pool of blood. Calm down and let Shani and me take care of you." And the Witcher is essentially like, you're over here talking about great causes, but you know what? There's fucking people dead here, you know? And this guy got away to just wreak more havoc another day. And I cannot with the fact that you're trying to act like this is really trivial. You are the one continuing to point out how I'm like about to bleed to death. But yeah, it's just not a big deal that we really need to overlook in favor of some other... Your end which justifies the means. Can you hear those voices? Those are cats fighting for a great cause. For indivisible mastery over a heap of rubbish. It's no joking matter. Blood is being spilled and clumps of fur are flying. It's war. But I care incredibly little about either of these wars, the cat's or yours. And she says, you keep on acting like you don't have to be part of this, that you get to choose whether you're involved. That's not true. You don't get to be like separate from this. And she says you're eventually gonna have to pick a side, just the way that Triss did, just as Yennefer had to. I keep wanting to call her Yennefer. Your destiny is in Yennefer's hands, and you placed it in those hands yourself. My destiny, I'll tell you, Philippa, what I've chosen. I won't allow you to involve Ciri in your dirty machinations. I'm warning you, whoever dares harm Ciri will end up like those 4 lying there. I won't swear an oath. I have nothing by which to swear. I simply warn you. You accuse me of being a bad guardian, that I don't know how to protect the child. I will protect her as best I can. I will kill. I will kill mercilessly. I believe you, but not today and not now, because in a minute you're going to faint from loss of blood. And that's the end of that chapter. There's a brief after chapter, a couple of paragraphs about how nobody really knows about who gets to be a wizard and who isn't. They thought that it was like about genetics, but they're starting to think that that is not the case. And there are people, you know, who are able to who have power, but have children and their children don't have power. It's just kind of unpredictable. And then there's a weird part. Most of us wizards lose the ability to procreate due to somatic changes and dysfunction of the pituitary gland. Some wizards, usually women, attune to magic while still maintaining efficiency of the gonads. They can conceive and give birth, and have the audacity to consider this happiness and a blessing. But I repeat, no one is born a wizard, and no one should be born one. Conscious of the gravity of what I write, I answer the question posed at the Congress in Sidaris. Each one of us must decide what she wants to be, a wizard or a mother. I demand all apprentices be sterilized without exception. Tisea DeVries, the poisoned source. And Tisea is the one, I believe, that was talking to what's-his-face about the Witcher being killed. So that's horrifying. Have the audacity to consider this a happiness and a blessing. Damn, this woman has some pretty intense feelings about this. I'm wondering if this is going to happen to Ciri or not. I guess we shall see. So, let's begin on chapter 7. We start off, this is Ciri, and she's at this, like, weird little boarding school / immersive program. Yola II, I find out later that Yola is, it says here that she's a novice, like she's like, I didn't hear the novice admitted, but later, Yennefer talks about Yola like she's somebody who's sort of in a position of authority a little bit, and I'm not sure if she's like a prefect, like the equivalent of that, but it seems like in whatever social pecking order there is at this place, that she's higher up on the list than Ciri is. I'm not positive of that, but that was just like part of the vibe that I seem to get. And they're talking about the rumors that there is going to be a war. And Ciri's like, I really don't see it. I think that maybe they're just talking about like the raids with the Scoia'tael, but I don't feel like there's an actual war. They said this time it wasn't around the squirrels. Castles and citadels have apparently been ordered to store supplies in case of a siege. But elves attack in forests. They don't lay siege to castles. The Grieve asked whether the temple could give more cheese and other things for the castle stores, and he demanded goose feathers. They need a lot of goose feathers, he said, for arrows to shoot from bows. Do you understand? We're going to have masses of work. You'll see. We'll be up to our ears in work. Now comes in Yennefer, is what I'm going to call her. Yennefer is a bitch. Just straight up no chaser. We're going to be up to our ears in work. Not all of us, said Yennefer scathingly. Some aren't going to get their little hands dirty. Some of us only work 2 days a week. They don't have any time for work because they are apparently studying witchery. But in actual fact, they're probably only idling or skipping around the park, thrashing weeds with a stick. You know who I'm talking about, Ciri, don't you? I hated this so much. Ciri will leave for the war, no doubt, giggled Yola II. After all, she's apparently the daughter of a knight, and herself a great warrior with a terrible sword. At last she'll be able to cut real heads off instead of nettles. No, she's a powerful wizard, Yennefer wrinkled her little nose. She's going to change all our enemies into field mice. Ciri, show us some amazing magic. Make yourself invisible, or make the carrots ripen quicker, or do something so that the chickens can feed themselves. Well, go on, don't make us ask. Cast a spell. Magic isn't for show, said Ciri angrily. Magic is not some street market trick. Oh, of course. Oh my God, guys. I need to say how much I admire Ciri keeping her cool and not rising to the bait, because if I were in her shoes at her age, I would have shown them something to scare the bejesus out of them. I couldn't have resisted that. With that goading? Are you kidding me? I'm not that big a person. I'm sorry. I would have just completely I would cave immediately. And Yola says something about how you are even starting to smell like Yennefer. Do you use magical scents? And she says, no, I use soap, something you rarely use. And Unaid says, oh, what sarcasm, what spite, which is just amazing. Like, you guys were the ones being spiteful and sarcastic a second ago, but sure, go off. She's practically stopped attending lessons at the temple and no longer has a moment to spare for us. And we have to do all the work for her, both in the kitchen and the garden. Look at her little hands, like a princess. That's the way it is, squeaked Ciri. Some have brains, so they get a book. Others are feather-brained, so they get a broom. Which, you know what, Ciri? Maybe don't. Just saying. But just listen, I get it, but also don't. And this is just basically going back and forth for a little bit until they finally leave her alone. And we get her going to see Jar, or maybe Jerry, depending on how this is pronounced. I'm going to call him Jerry just because that's such an ordinary sounding name that it seems to suit this very ordinary sounding boy pretty well. And Jerry, bless him, is enamored of Ciri. She knows that he's enamored of her and is weirdly what's the word I want? She's disdainful of it, you know? It's weird though, because she's also a little interested in him as well. So she simultaneously gives off this air of I don't have time for this. But there's a flicker of curiosity behind it all. And she's here to ask to see some maps, because she's trying to get a handle on, quote, the political landscape. The novices did sneak keen glances at the boy and chatted freely, discussing the various possibilities presented by the presence on the temple grounds of something which wore trousers. Ciri was amazed, because Jerry was the exact opposite of everything which in her eyes should represent an attractive male. In Cintra, as she remembered, an attractive man was one whose head reached the ceiling, whose shoulders were as broad as a doorway, who swore like a dwarf, roared like a buffalo, stank at 30 paces of horses' sweat and beer, regardless of what time of day or night it was. Men who did not correspond to this description were not recognized by Queen Calanthe's chambermaids as worthy of sighs and gossip. Ciri had also seen a number of different men, the wise and gentle druids of Angren, the tall and gloomy settlers of Sodden, the witchers of Kaer Morhen. Jerry was different. He was as skinny as a stick insect, ungainly, wore clothes which were too large and smelled of ink and dust, always had greasy hair, and on his chin, instead of stubble, there were 7 or 8 long hairs, about half of which sprang from a large wart. Truly, Ciri did not understand why she was so drawn to Jerry's tower. She enjoyed talking to him. The boy knew a great deal, and she could learn much from him. But recently, when he looked at her, his eyes had a strange, dazed, and cloying expression. So, Jerry sounds real rough-looking, and he is... She's learning how to turn to her advantage the fact that she has grown and looks more voluptuous than she used to. Lady Yennefer has more important things to worry about, Ciri spat, but then immediately had second thoughts, and smiled pleasantly and fluttered her eyelashes. Oh, Jerry, tell me, please. You're so clever. You can talk so beautifully and learnedly. I could listen to you for hours. Please, Jerry. The boy turned red, and his eyes grew unfocused and bleary. Ciri sighed surreptitiously. Do y'all remember that moment when you realized that you had this kind of power? It's like quite a trip, especially the real first moments, because I remember the exact interaction that caused me to genuinely realize that I had transitioned from ugly duckling in middle school to basically jailbait hottie in high school. And I was being treated like I was super pretty, but I didn't believe it, and I genuinely thought that these dudes were making fun of me and treating me a certain way as a joke. Because that had happened to me once in middle school. These guys were nice to me, and then one of them was like, that neither of us are going to go out with you, right? And that hadn't even occurred to me. So when they said it, I was just confused as to why they seemed to think that was what I wanted when I was not interested in either one of them. But it made me really paranoid about my interactions with dudes later on. And so it took me a while to finally realize that the way that men were reacting to me, and I say men in addition to boys because it's true. It took me a while to realize that I could control how that went and get things out of it. And the surreptitious sigh that she makes is really on point, because there's a bit of a rush at having that power, but then you also are inevitably disappointed by the fact that these men are so easy to manipulate and so simple. And it's embarrassing a little bit once you realize how little effort you really have to put forth in order to get them to completely just bend over backward and let you do anything. So I really enjoy this moment of her just being I always want to come up here and talk to this kid. I don't really get it because he's not hot at all, but here I am. And if he isn't cooperative with the information that I want to get out of him, I'll be able to get it. No problem. But also, I don't really want to do this, but also I'm a little curious about doing this. And it makes sense. I mean, rarely is it a guy that's super hot that gets your attention when you're that age. It's not, it's always somebody else who is as awkward and weird about it as you are. And you're both feeling things out, pun intended, at the same time. So there comes a long section that I won't get into too much of descriptions of these maps. I have not flipped around in this, in the ebook that I have to see if there are maps at the beginning or end of the book. But there's a lot of them talking about this border and that border, and it's impossible for me to keep straight in my head. Let's see. Oh yeah. She goes through his stuff and he's going in and out of a couple of different shelves. And at one point, from between the pages suddenly slipped a loose page with a picture of a woman, completely naked, with her hair curled into ringlets, entangled in an embrace with a completely naked bearded man. Her tongue sticking out, the girl spent a long time turning the etching around, unable to make out which way up it should be. She finally spotted the most important detail in the picture and giggled. Jerry, walking up with an enormous scroll under his arm, blushed violently, took the etching from her without a word, and hid it under the papers strewn across the table. So yeah, this is really I enjoy this a lot. I love the fact that he uses the word analogy and asks if she knows what it means. And she says she does, even though she does not. And then goes on and uses the word analogies incorrectly for the entire rest of the chapter. Are there any more pictures like that in there? Interesting. The book is called Healing and Curing. I'd like to know what diseases are cured that way. So that's pretty fun. Yeah, like that. You don't have porn. I guess what are you going to do, right? All right, so where is this Nilfgaard? I can't see a country like that here. Doesn't it fit on this map of yours or what? Get me a bigger one. I don't have any maps like that, but I do know that Nilfgaard is somewhere further towards the south. There, more or less, I think. And she's actually pretty surprised when he points out, like, generally where it would be, how far away it turns out to be. So let's see. Tell me about the war. We're kneeling on political geography. Draw conclusions through analogy and through anything you like. I am all ears. So he talks about the Yaruga River, and this is where we get a little bit of detail about where, like, the gnomes are. He says, for a long stretch here, it flows between precipitous, inaccessible banks, between the rocks of Mahakim. And then later on, he says, here is Verdun, here is Bruges, and that is Brokilon Forest, Forbidden Territory, the Kingdom of Forest Dryads. Brokilon is also defending our flank. The Dryads won't let anyone pass. The Nilfgaardians either. So, they're in the middle of this. Here's Erden and the town of Vengerberg. Jerry, stop that immediately. The boy abruptly pulled his lips away from her hair and went red as a beetroot. I do not wish you to do that to me. Ciri, I came to you with a serious matter as a wizard to a scholar, she said icily and with dignity, in a tone of voice which exactly copied that of Yennefer. So behave. The scholar blushed an even deeper shade, and had such a stupid expression on his face that the wizard could barely keep herself from laughing. He leaned over the map once more. Oh, Jerry. Buddy, you're not ready at all. So then something is kind of interesting. He says, something about we're in a united alliance like at the Battle of Sodden, the four kingdoms, Temeria, Redania, Erden, and Cadwin. Cadwin, said Ciri proudly. Yes, I know what that alliance is based on. King Henselt of Cadwin offers special secret aid to King Demavend of Erden. That aid is transported in barrels, and when King Demavend suspects someone of being a traitor, he puts stones in the barrels, sets a trap. She broke off, recalling that Geralt had forbidden her to mention the events in Cadwin. Jerry stared at her suspiciously. Is that so? And how can you know all that? I read about it in a book written by Marshall Pelican and in other analogies. Oh, girl. So, yeah, she's clearly referencing the trap of the 2 chapters ago at this point, I think. When they thought that one of the dwarves was actually a traitor, and it turned out that he wasn't, but they only thought he was just because of the fact that he was a dwarf, which is insulting. Racists. So, he points out this valley, and he says that there was fighting. And she says, if there was fighting, there's a war already. So what are you talking about? It's not the first time that there's been fighting, clarified Jerry, but the girls saw he was less and less sure of himself. Incidents at the border are very frequent, but they're insignificant. How come? The forces are balanced. Neither we nor the Nilfgaardians can do anything, and neither of the sides can give their opponents a reason for war. That's why the armed incidents are most certainly fortuitous matters. In no way can they be the work of regular armies, because that would be precisely casus belli. So basically, they're poking and prodding at each other, probably using brigands and smugglers as cat's paws to try and get some shit started. But they're not actually openly hostile yet. And she gets interrupted here and is summoned by Lady Yennefer. So, let's talk about Yennefer. Because, honestly, Ciri is kind of ballsy. At one point, she is told that she can ask Yennefer anything, and she straight up is like, "So what's going on with you and Geralt, though?" And I was like, "Ciri, what are you doing?" But yeah, this whole thing, it's like when she first comes in, we get to see how completely at ease she is with Yennefer, which startled me because I didn't realize so much time had passed. And Ciri gets into the tub and is soaping herself up while Yennefer is staring out the window. And I love the fact that she's thinking to herself how she wishes that magicians could come up with something to not have to bathe like this, because it is such a waste of time and energy, which I found pretty amusing. And she sees that there are letters sitting here. In spite of what she had told Jerry, the girl had no idea where and why they were leaving. But in those letters, splashing with her left hand so as to mislead, she arranged the fingers of her right in a gesture, concentrated on a formula, fixed her eyes on the letters, and sent out an impulse. "Don't you even dare," said Yennefer, without turning around. "I thought," she cleared her throat, "I thought one of them might be from Geralt. If it was, I'd have given it to you." So I'm real curious how it is that Yennefer knows that she's about to cast a spell. Because Yennefer is able to sort of read her mind a couple of times. Forgive me, I'm taking a sip. Gotta wet this whistle. But yeah, she, at one point, she's thinking to herself, "I'm going to run away." And Yennefer can totally hear her. So I'm wondering if that's what it is, or if she can feel the impulse that Ciri sent out. I'm just curious, which part of this is giving Ciri away. And she is, when Ciri gets up out of the water, Yennefer turns around and sort of inspects her and is like, "Welp, it's happened. You're basically done with childhood and you have rounded out where necessary. Surely you've not forgotten what we talked about." "No, I haven't. When you visit Jerry, I hope there aren't any problems with your memory either." Ciri lowered her eyes, but only momentarily. Yennefer did not smile. "Dry yourself and come here. No splashing, please." "Are you angry with me for going to the tower?" "No, but Nenneke doesn't like it. You know that." "But I don't care about Jerry in the least. Exactly. You only. Don't play the child, because you're not one anymore, let me remind you. That boy slobbers and stammers at the sight of you. Can't you see that?" "That's not my fault. What am I supposed to do?" "Don't toy with him. It's base." "But I'm not toying with him. I'm only talking to him." "I'd like to believe that during these conversations you remember what I asked you." I remember. He's an intelligent and bright boy. One or two inadvertent words could lead him on the right track to matters he should know nothing about. No one, absolutely no one, must find out who you are." "I remember. Is that why we're leaving so suddenly? Are you afraid someone's going to find out I'm here? Is that why?" "No, there are other reasons." "Is it because there might be a war? Everyone's talking about it." Indeed, it's a subject which belongs to the so-called interminable category. There's been talk about wars in the past, there's talk now, and there always will be, and not without reason. There have been wars, and there will be wars. Lower your head. So, yeah, I liked this conversation between the two of them. The way that, like, there's a combination of Ciri wanting to know about more abstract political stuff and, like, the implications of different things and rumors about the direction that things are going. But then there's also really basic questions that Ciri asks here and later about sex and, like, when you know it's the right time and all of this. And I like the combo of topics coming up because of, like, it just really displays to us the role that Yennefer is playing in Ciri's life. Let's see. I'm trying to find the spot that I wanted to start this again. Oh yeah. I've already seen a war, she whispered. I don't want to see another. Never. I don't want to be alone again. I don't want to be frightened. I don't want to lose everything again like last time. I don't want to lose Geralt or you, Lady Yennefer. I don't want to lose you. I want to stay with you. And him. Always. You will. The magician's voice trembled a little. And I'm going to be with you, Ciri. Always. I promise you. And I like that, too. It's just a really, like, touching little moment. When I arrived here, the Lady Magician suddenly said in her usual melodious, slightly mocking voice, when we first met, you didn't like me. And then we kind of go back and see the way that everything went down with first meeting her. She was summoned to go and see Yennefer, and she didn't know who this was. Like, she heard the name, but it didn't mean anything to her. And Yennefer basically sees her and is, like, really intimidating right out of the gate because she's incredibly beautiful, which we know is all, like, basically a glamour, but nevertheless. And she sort of, like, looks over Ciri in such a way that Ciri finds really degrading. You know, like she's looking over a horse that she's planning to buy or something. Just, Ciri's just kind of like, what the fuck, dude? Like, as this continues to go on, she does not care for it. And as it starts off just, like, insulting, but as it goes on, she gets more and more angry about it and starts to really be, like, enraged, finally, by the end. Has she suffered any infectious diseases in childhood? Has she been ill since she's been here? She's tall for her age. And the magician, she gets really angry at the idea of this girl being given elixirs. She says, it appears from his letter that in Kaer Morhen they didn't try out any of their experiments. I would like to believe that's true. It is. They gave her only natural stimulants. Stimulants are never natural. The magician raised her voice. Never. It is precisely the stimulants which may have aggravated her symptoms and... Damn it. I never suspected him of such irresponsibility. Calm down. Nenike looked at her coldly, and all of a sudden, somehow oddly without respect. I said they were natural and absolutely safe. Forgive me, dear, but in this respect I am a greater authority than you. I know it is exceedingly difficult for you to accept someone else's authority, but in this case I am forced to inflict it on you, and let there be no more talk about it. So, that's pretty fun. I like seeing that Nenike, like, stands up to Yennefer the way that she does, because, like, we had heard a little bit of, Ciri, like, having these dreams and waking up and hearing Yennefer and Nenike arguing amongst themselves, but it was hard to tell from that little moment whether or not Nenike was bringing up valid complaints, whether or not this was an unusual circumstances. Like, it was just a fight, and it wasn't clear exactly what had happened to spur this in her. And I really like this moment because you get to see exactly what motivates her to really put her foot down in talking to this woman. And I find that helpful to figure out what kind of person she is. And this makes me respect her, that she has the guts to like stand up to somebody like Yennefer, who is obviously very intimidating and self-assured, and to just get right up in there with her and be like, no, I hear you starting to get like a little bit out of hand with your criticisms of this, and it's not like that, and I'm not going to stand here and let you make both of us look like fools because you have feelings about this that are based in ignorance. Which, you know what? Go on with your bad self, Nenneke. Like, I don't know how you feel about everything else, but in this respect, I'm actually kind of impressed. And let's see. You're going with Lady Yennefer now. She'll look after you for a while. You are no doubt baffled that a mistress of wizardry is suddenly taking you into her care, but you are a reasonable girl, Ciri. You can guess why. You've inherited certain attributes from your ancestors. You know what I'm talking about. You used to come to me after those dreams, after the nocturnal disturbances in the dormitory. I couldn't help you, but Lady Yennefer, interrupted the magician, will do what is necessary. Let us go, girl. And this is when she thinks to herself, Ciri thinks to herself, I'll run away. Indeed you will, said the magician under her breath. I beg your pardon? The priestess raised her head. What did you say? Nothing, smiled Yennefer. You just thought I did. Or maybe I thought I did. Just look at this ward of yours, Nenneke, furious as a cat, sparks in her eyes. Just wait, and she'll hiss. And if she could flatten her ears, she would. A witcher girl. I have to take her firmly in hand and file her claws. Be more understanding. The high priestess's features visibly hardened. Please, be kind-hearted and understanding. She really is not who you take her to be. What do you mean by that? She's not your rival, Yennefer. For a moment they measured each other without any restraint. This Kindle started to oh yeah, here it is. For a moment they measured each other with their eyes. The enchantress and the priestess and Ciri felt the air quiver, a strange, terrible force between them growing in strength. This lasted no more than a fraction of a second, after which the force disappeared and Yennefer burst out laughing, light-heartedly and sweetly. I forgot, always on his side, aren't you? And you're always against him. So that's interesting, and this could mean all kinds of things, because she says she's not your rival. And later on, it's mentioned that Ciri, finally brings up Triss, and had very carefully not mentioned Triss at all in the beginning of their relationship, because I guess she sensed that Yennefer's feelings on Triss were going to be less than friendly. And I'm wondering, does Yennefer think that she's her rival magically, or that she's her rival R.E. Geralt? The girl is so young, but if she's magical, I guess she could live a long time. If that's not incorrect about the mythology of this world, do magicians and wizards last longer than regular old humans? And witchers, do they last longer? Because if so, that gives a lot more time and a lot more possibility for Ciri to potentially get involved with Geralt, I guess. I don't really get the vibe that Ciri's interested, but I'm also, that can change with time, especially if he's one of the only men that she's been able to trust in her life. It's just weird to me that she seems concerned in either direction that this girl might be her rival, magically as well, because she's got completely untapped power that Yennefer is here to release basically. And it's weird to me, the idea that, like, she'd be training somebody to reach their full potential while also apparently, like, wanting to keep them from reaching their full potential. Just seems like a little bit backward there, but, you know, people are like that. So we go through all of these different training exercises that Ciri goes through. And she is very willful at first and doesn't want to cooperate. And Yennefer has to sit her down and be like, girl, listen, I understand that you don't want to cooperate and that you have your own mind and that you're smart, you know, that you're smart and resourceful and whatever. But if I have to force you to cooperate by putting you under a spell and basically immobilizing you, I'll do it. And I don't even care. I've had to do it before. I just don't think that I should do that with you because you seem to be a cut above the other kids that I've dealt with. And if you just stop and think, you'll realize that cooperating with me is in your best interest. And where's the, oh yeah. You are persistently staring at my neckline. Do you see anything unusual there, or is it just plain jealousy? That star, muttered Ciri. What's it made of? Those stones move and shine so strangely. They pulsate, smiled the magician. They are active diamonds sunken in obsidian. Do you want to see them close up? Touch them? No, I don't. Why should I? I'm not interested. Not a bit. I'm a witcher. I haven't got any magical abilities. I'm not cut out to be a magician. Surely that's clear because I'm... And anyway, I've got to think about it. So there's this whole fight. Eventually, of course, she cracks, but it's sort of weird to me that she's so fixated on just being a witcher at the expense of pursuing what are obvious magical talents that she's got that everybody can see. She just doesn't... I don't know if it's part of her feeling like she's betraying Geralt somehow, but... yeah, this whole, like, resistance is a little bit tedious because I'm like, we know that you're going to give in eventually, so just go ahead. Which inevitably, yes, she does. And we get little vignettes of her training, and the fact that she has been told that she's that by virtue of being a virgin, which she still is, that she can't do magic. And Yennefer's like, that's nothing. You can totally do, that doesn't have anything to do with anything. And as they're talking about this, Ciri is like doing these drawings, which sound like vaguely like IQ questions. It's such a weird thing. I don't know what any of this means, but like later when Ciri asks, like, when did you know that I had these abilities? She's like, oh, I knew before I ever had you do any of that stuff. Like, it's just sort of like testing her in a weird way. So, and part of their deal with each other is that she is going to be allowed to ask questions that Yennefer has to answer honestly, but Ciri also has to be completely honest with Yennefer. And let's see. Oh yeah. You're not mistaken? You're sure I have ability? I'm sure. But, Ciri, from the moment we lay down in this meadow, I have been talking to you without using my voice. It's called telepathy. Remember that. And as you no doubt noticed, it has not made our talking together any more difficult. So I like that a lot, that particular bit. And then she starts with the official training and talks about how some people see magic as art. Some people see it as the embodiment of chaos. Some people see it as science. And essentially, all three of those people are right in their own ways. And she shows Ciri how to tap into different lines of power, basically like ley lines underneath the surface of the earth. And that water tends to be the easiest source of magic for Ciri to tap. Earth, she's not really strong enough to do yet. And fire is way too volatile and dangerous. So she basically makes Ciri promise not to mess with fire magic. As for air, I don't know. I'm trying to find the exact moment where she like gives her a reason for each of these, for the reason that she chooses what she does. Let's see. Long, arduous days follow. Oh, right. She basically does like a bit of hypnotizing to get her to see into her past, because Yennefer is trying to sort of crack through and find out information that Ciri has got in her head but blocked away for one reason or another. And there's a lot of practice of, and there's no like wands in this, but there's a lot of practice of like hand movements being exactly right. And I liked that. And there's the wonderful conversation. How can you tell it's the right one to go to bed with? If you have any choice at all, the enchantress twisted her lips in a smile, but don't have much experience, you first appraise the bed. Those who don't have a bed at all, you eliminate on the spot. From those who remain, you eliminate the owners of any dirty or slovenly beds. And when only those who've clean and tidy beds remain, you choose the one you find most attractive. Unfortunately, the method is not 100% foolproof. You can make a terrible mistake. You know what? That's just as good a way of figuring it out as any, I suppose. So, yeah, this basically is like a lot of teaching and Ciri learning. Some things she learns a lot more slowly than others, but Yennefer seems pretty impressed with her progress. And I'm trying to find, oh, here it is. If you're still too weak to draw energy from the earth, you don't know enough to succeed in drawing anything from the air. And as for fire, I absolutely forbid you to play with it. I've already told you under no circumstances are you allowed to touch the energy of fire. That's right. So she pushes her about like whether she remembers her parents. Ciri tries to tell her like the vague things she remembers, but there's not a whole lot. And at one point when she brings up Triss, Yennefer just kind of like pumps her for information and then lets it free. Decides that she's not going to ask anymore. And by the end of this chapter, or this book, really, Ciri has like progressed enough that it is time to move on and get out of this school. So she leaves, and there's this like sadness in her teacher's eyes, and she's like, it'll be fine. What do you mean? It's like, I'm going to be back, she says to her. And she is completely wrong. She does not wind up coming back. She did not know how very wrong she was. So, yeah, that's the end of the book. So there's a lot left to happen, apparently. That's a lot of setup. I feel like this whole book was a lot of setup about different things. So, yeah, thank you, Melanie, very much for commissioning this. This was really interesting. There's a lot. If any of you, like Melanie, if you know of a good map that doesn't have spoilers in it that you can refer me to, or a just straight up list of some of the characters, I would really appreciate it, because I think I need that. But yeah, with that, I'm going to wrap. So thank you all again for listening, and I'll see you again soon with a new episode. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.